Hello, and welcome to Life, but Make It Business, where we talk to professionals about life lessons that they've learned in their career that are both applicable to life and business. My name is Sangmi, and I'm one of your co-hosts. I met Shannon in the William Mary MBA program, and I wanted to learn ways to improve my family's business, which is a Taekwondo school.
And I am Shannon Fox Day. I'm a project manager for a mid-sized consulting firm out of DC. My specialty is in geographic information systems, i.e. map making. And I am in the MBA program in order to grow my career and advance and learn and grow and all of those fantastic things. And that is how I met Sangmi in communication for managers. No, finance.
Oh, it's finance. You're right.
Accounting. Whew,
Yeah.
that was a doozy.
We're really excited today to have Ms. Helen McCormack, who is actually one of our first EPs that we've never met before. So we're excited to hear about how her career journey started. She actually has a BA in elementary and special education from Boston College, but then earned her MBA at William Mary, like we're doing, and moved into finance and spent most of her career in Kraft Foods. But Miss Helen, you can elaborate because, like I said, we've never actually met you before. So I would love to hear your intro to yourself.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, I'm Helen McCormack, and my career has been a little bit unusual in terms of, I got a degree in elementary and special ed and taught for 4 years in Virginia before deciding that this, it wasn't working for me and that I needed more control over my career and what I was doing. And so, you kind of say, okay, education, business, and especially finance, like how do you get there? And so for me, it was I knew after my third year that I needed to look for something else. And I happened to have a friend who was getting her master's in like counseling. And so in order to get that, she had to learn how to give all kinds of tests. So I was her guinea pig, and I took interest inventories and IQ tests and all kinds of other things. And one of the things that popped out was like management. And I was like, oh, my dad's a banker, my uncle's in sales, everybody's doing something in business, and why hasn't this occurred to me before? So I started taking some courses at night from George Mason, and said, okay, I think I could do business. I took my GMATs, and then I was ready. And it was probably the scariest thing I have ever done in my entire life, because I came down to Williamsburg and pursued a full-time MBA and did the whole thing on my own. And so so I don't think I've ever studied so hard in my entire life as I did, especially my first year, because I was afraid that I was just afraid of failing. But I loved it. And I found for me, maybe some of it was because of the background in education, the courses that were very intuitive for me were the organizational behavior, the marketing, but the ones that like were really challenging and really appealed to me were the quantitative ones. And I had not taken a really quantitative course since high school, because I took math for elementary teachers in college. And so I just really jumped into it, and I liked finance because it was logical. And I liked it because I like to problem solve. And there's so much you can do in finance, like looking at the financial statements and where do they go and how do they go? Or if you're going to be making a capital decision, how do you end up doing that? And so, so at the time, we didn't have the GCMC, and there really weren't a lot of there wasn't a lot of help in terms of like, how do you progress? How do you get your first job? And so most of us did like mass mailing campaigns and that type of thing. And I got picked up by General Foods and interviewed with them, and it was just such a great fit. I spent my entire career in consumer products and in food, and it was just so much fun. So that, I could do serious stuff around finance, but like you were always around food. So I did really neat stuff, especially at the beginning of my career. Going off, they'd send us off to do store checks because we had a brokered sales force. And so, my parents were living in Texas at the time, and I flew down, and, I did all the looking at the shelves and that type of thing. And my mother was like, "What are you doing? You're touching the products," and I was like, no, we're trying to make it look good. I want people to buy the Kool-Aid,
Front and face, right?
That's right, front and face. And and people would put, I don't know, their drinks, just like stick them anywhere. And I'm like pulling it all forward. And my mother was appalled at first. But by the end of the whole journey, she was, I'd go back and she was like, "Helen, I straightened the shelves for you the other day." But it was just, so much fun to see a concept turn into a product and turn into, a regional or a national launch, and seeing some of that type of things. So I worked in all kinds of financial areas. They generally, most consumer products companies, they want good financial generalists. So I did the whole planning and analysis, which is, forecasting and then looking at actuals and explaining your actuals. I did marketing and sales finance, where I'd work with the product management team or the sales team, and this is how we're going to take things to market and price them out, or making the decisions. The product management team had P&Ls that were brand based, and so they'd have their financial targets, and we'd be forecasting, and if sales were up, we'd be trying to plan, how to push them even further, or we'd be told by the division, "No, we want that money and you've got to give it up for the greater good." But if sales were down, we were like, "Okay, where's the best place to cut?" and that type of thing. I also spent a lot of time in product costing. And so I am one of the most non-mechanical people in the whole world, but we'd go into the plants and we'd be, looking at, if you put a new line, how do you crew it? How do you price, what are the labor costs? What are the costs on the formula, building it up, and that kind of thing. And then I'd get to watch how from an engineering point of view, you'd like close the cases automatically, and which I'd be like, "I can't believe it's that easy," but it is. I ended up in towards the end of my career, we did a major ERP system implementation. So we put in SAP, and I worked on the beginning side as a subject matter expert and design, and then went into the process management side. And once we were rolling out, did the training and development. And then after Kraft Foods split into Kraft and Mondelez, I became the business process excellence lead for Mondelez North America. And so all the financial systems came in through me, and we'd work on enhancing systems, changing our processes, any kind of major changes in that regard. So I did that for like 30 years, and then we said, New Jersey is way too cold and the taxes are way too high, and let's come on back to Williamsburg. So that's what my husband and I did.
Awesome. And so you're here now.
Yep. So I'm here now.
Fantastic. It's gorgeous out today. So
It's a beautiful day.
Your enthusiasm is so palpable when you talk about the various projects you're on. It's very inspiring to me that you're so excited about what you do.
It was just so much fun. And, working for consumer products, I don't know, we used to have the product of the month. So, they'd give you that and you'd bring it home. For a while, Kraft Foods, oh my God. Yeah, our portfolio of products was enormous. And, I'd bring something home from the company store and my husband would be like, "You make that?" How did this happen? But it would just be so much fun to see the products that you worked on go on to the shelf. And even, I worked in the coffee division for a while, Maxwell House Coffee, and I don't drink coffee. And actually, one of the things as I was interviewing, this one executive said to me, "So, can I get you some coffee?" And I'm like, "No, I don't drink coffee." And he was like, "You will." And so, and I was stubborn and I didn't. But when I worked for the coffee division, they had this coffee 101 and they'd have you sample the coffees. And I drank the coffees, and by the early afternoon, I was like, "No, I got to go home." I just, it was just like way too much caffeine. I just couldn't do it anymore. But it was still just a lot of fun relating to the products.
Yeah, that's super awesome that you found something that you love so much, and especially coming from such a different field.
Yeah.
Before we started this podcast, we were talking about the pivoting, and a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, are very interested, especially because, like you mentioned, like MBA students tend to be trying to make a shift in their lives. Do you feel like there was a core, thing that kind of applied to both your education, like getting that BA in education and your career in finances, or did you had to suppress something? Just, kind of like how, just kind of go into, do you think there was a core self mission that kind of guided you towards finding that pivot, or what do you advise for people?
Well, one of the things, and it's interesting because I have this year I've talked to at least one full-time MBA that came from teaching, and really, it's kind of the elephant in the room as far as an interview. Like, you have to hit it, and you have to hit it fast, and you've got to hit it hard. And so then I would talk about the skills I learned as a teacher and how it would make me successful in business. And so I said, look, I have, great communication skills and presentation skills. And as a special education teacher, I had to learn how to take tasks and break them down into small parts and build them back up again. And so that, I said that all those things will help me be successful as a financial manager in your organization. But the one thing that kind of bit me at one point in my career is that I was so used to the teaching that I had a boss and a mentor who said to me that when I presented, I could be viewed as patronizing, kind of like pushing, kind of like, "Okay, this is how we do things," and that I had to get rid of that. And for me, it was just a major kind of life lesson, because my first reaction was like, "Nah, that's not me." Yeah, no, not working. And then I really thought about it long and hard and said, this is his reality. And if it's his reality, I have to respect that and say, how can I change? And I worked at it. And he later said to me, he said, he was known as a very blunt person, very funny. So he offset all his bluntness with being really super funny. But but he said, I tell people every day this is what they have to do so they can be promoted, so they can make it to the next step. And he said, and very often I get ignored. And he was like, and you recognized it and did something about it. And so it was the whole thing was a great learning experience for me.
It's so great to have someone provide that feedback to you. Do you think that you would have realized that at some point later if he hadn't? Or things like that can be considered pretty sensitive as well, because, you know, as women in the workforce, we often have this weird game of, are you aggressive? Are you too aggressive? And yeah, are you patronizing to the men in the room and things like that? Do you think that you would have come to that realization without that feedback? Or
you know, I think I would have, but I you know, after I had made the changes and showed that I was acting differently, I you know, I got what was a promotion to a banded position. And so I just think it would have taken me longer to get there.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine, and you know, maybe this did or didn't happen, but I would imagine that when he saw that you took that feedback seriously, he gave you more feedback. Did it kind of become more of a dialogue between the two of you of you know, things like that, I wonder?
Well, I think it did. I mean, he became he had promoted me, and then I moved off at, you know, a year afterwards. But he stayed a mentor to me because
Mhm.
I knew, you know, uh, because I trusted, you know, his point of view and what he said to me. And so that just really helped me connect with him in a way that I probably hadn't been connecting him with him before.
Another thing that stood out to me earlier was when you said, you know, the qualitative classes came intuitively to you, and then you went into finance because it was more challenging and therefore more interesting to you. I wonder if you can maybe go into what do you think like foster that in you, you know, as you came up as a young adult, right? Like what made you like things that were more challenging rather than stuff that was easy?
You know, I don't know. I'm one of six. And so, as you know, my family, we're all like very competitive. And, you know, throughout the pandemic, we've been, you know, we just finished a March Madness pool. We now moved on to a Masters pool. I know nothing about golf. That didn't matter. I've got two teams, and I'm partnering with my youngest brother on a third. So it just you know, I think that it you know, I don't know what it is, but I think when I've been told no, I it something in me kicks in. So I, you know, in high school, um I went from a small Catholic school into a much larger high school. My freshman year was like just fine, but not great. And my father said, "Hey, do you want to go to college?" And I was like, "I want to get out of here." You know, you could see a progression in my grades from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior that were just higher and higher and higher. And when I went into the MBA program, the major quantitative statistics class that we had, the professor got in front of the beginning of the room and he said, "You know what, if you haven't had either a, you know, a science-based statistics course or a business statistics course, you're not going to get an A in this." And I was like, "No, I'm going to get an A in this." And I did. So it was, I think that kind of started it. It was just like, okay, I'm going to prove that in some ways it was my way of proving that you know, I had a place you know, in this program. So I hadn't even thought of it that way before though.
That reminds me so much of one of my favorite quotes. You know, it's an Ayn Rand quote, and I know people are controversial over her, but she said, "It's not about who's going to let me, it's about who's going to stop me." And that I have thought of that, forever, and just always tried to apply that, myself, because I can identify with your kind of need to say, well, okay, I can't do that. Well, go ahead and watch me.
Yeah.
It's, well, all right, then I'm going to be the first one there, and I'm going to do this. And the best way to kind of exact that revenge is to do the thing, and I always thought of that. So applying that, I think, to your career and growth, is that how you approached problems kind of in the workforce and as you were growing in the workforce? I think coming into something at a large company, coming into a position at a large company like Kraft Food, did you feel that you were encountering those types of obstacles there as well, where it was like, oh, we don't really know if you can do that, and you kind of were like, no, I'm going to do this? Or did you find that it was a little bit easier compared to your teaching experience?
Yeah. There were certainly moments of that. There were, a couple of positions that I took that, the first director-based position that I took, I was offered the position because the VP of operations had worked with me before and said, I want her. And so it was really very much connection based, but it really wasn't necessarily assured, that I never got the feeling that my functional boss, who I actually knew pretty well, really would have chosen me if it had been fully up to him. And so that was, another kind of rise to the occasion and really make sure that I was on really the top of my game and, really tried to get things done. So yeah, I did. I think anytime there was kind of a major challenge thrown out, I did jump to it.
Which makes for exciting things, but also scary. Right.
Yeah, I do find that, fear can be a powerful motivator as long as it's not overwhelming. And so I know when I'd go into a new job and there'd be kind of like this feeling at the pit of my stomach that, this was another challenge that I really needed to rise to.
Mm-hmm. So going back a little bit to your realization that teaching wasn't for you, can you talk about how that played out? Because I do know, I started out in architecture and I really wanted to be an architect, and I was not good at it. And I had a similar type of experience, and that led me down a totally different path. And me and I know multiple people in our program who are feeling that. How did that realization come to you, and how did you work through that decision? Like, you know what, this isn't right for me. Because I think for many people, you have this concept of what you're supposed to do, and then you pick that thing and it becomes a little bit of your identity. And so when you realize this isn't for me, you're almost cutting off a piece of you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it becomes like, wow, do I know myself? How did that, can you talk to a little bit about how that transpired?
Yeah, so and I had, since I had been very small, I had always wanted to be a teacher. And, I always babysat. I was a camp counselor. And, this is just what I wanted to do. And it really never occurred to me that I wouldn't always love being a teacher. And I ended up having a crisis my third year of teaching, where I had a student so I taught a class for kids with behavioral and emotional problems, and it was a self-contained class. And I had a student who it was really painful to see. He self-destructed over the course of the year, and he increasingly became more violent to himself, to other kids, and even to like faculty members. And it was sad to see. And and the school committee, we said, he needs a more restrictive setting. And at towards the very end of the school year, we said, you know, we're going to send him out of the school, and we've got to figure out what the next steps are. And so it was a kind of a weird reporting relationship, because I really reported into the assistant principal and the principal of the school. But there was a supervisor that I had in my program, and, you know, it all really came down to kind of dollars. And they said to me, you know, this child, it was a 4th and 5th grade class. This child is going to come back into your class. And then what was really disturbing to me is then my supervisor said, and I really think you need counseling, because we think that part of this was really your problem. And I guess this goes back to the challenges, because it made me angry. And I said, it was a phone conversation. And I said, you know, I said, you know, if I went in for counseling, what they would tell me is that I need career counseling, because I'm not in control of my environment, and you're trying to do this, and you're trying to make me feel like it's my fault. And so I had, you know, I said, I know you can put this child back in my class next year, and they're really, and I can't do anything about it. But I said, but if I don't have the support from you, you know, if he comes back, I'm not coming back. And so the supervisor said, well, you know, I know you have just a general special education, so you could do a resource room or learning disabilities or this or that. And I said, no. I said, you don't understand. If he comes back, I'm leaving the school system. And so, but you can only play somebody's bluff like once. Yeah, I mean, like, I knew I couldn't. There's no way I could do this again. And so the student did not come back into my class, but did not leave the school system either. They moved the student to another school, another self-contained classroom, and there were 3 kids in that class. And I think some of it may have been he wasn't in his home school, the very, very, very small class. He did really pretty well that next year. But I just said, I can't stay here. So, I mean, this really just blew up in my face in a very, very big way. And that's when I started saying, okay, let me start, you know, looking at and studying for the GMATs. Let me, you know, at the same time, I'd been helping out my friend, and it was just kind of thinking about that I could do something else. You know, summers I was doing, doing retail. So I was working in a children's shoe store, and I realized that, you know, I could go into retail, but I'd be starting at the bottom. And that just, you know, I'm sure a lot of people love it, but it was just like not something that I really wanted to do. And so that really led me to, you know, to start looking at soul searching, figuring out what the next step was, and start applying to programs. And then I was fortunate that I had gone to such a great undergraduate school that its reputation, even though I was in education, its reputation really helped me as I was applying into programs.
Yeah, it really sounds like it was like a combination of, you know, there's that final straw where
Yeah.
you just kind of didn't feel comfortable. You know, it wasn't like, and then it lined up with your friends. So it was like a serendipitous series of events. And it wasn't just that that workplace specifically was not up your alley, because it like, you did leave teaching entirely. It
Yeah.
wasn't that, it was just an administration. So, I mean, that's, you know, a lot of people, it's like for movies and books, like it's very inspirational to have that one aha moment. But, you know, I think that's very comforting, you know, like how, like, it's a lot of those things. It's a lot of stuff together.
Yeah, and so while it was like really cathartic for me, you know, it was just like a big boom. On the other hand, I really worked hard at really making it a process and thinking things through and trying to make sure this was the right thing for me. But I figure, you know what? You know, pivoting is hard, but you can pivot. You know, if you can go from, you know, education into business. Or I had a coworker who she was a ballerina. So she, you know, she did the whole ballet school, and I mean, she got a degree as she did it, and then she probably 4 or 5 years, you know, tried to make it as a top level ballerina, and it didn't work. And she went back, you know, she went back to school and went into business also. So if you can pivot like that, you can really pivot from anywhere. It's really the hardest part is deciding what's the right thing for you.
I would definitely agree with that. One of my recent bosses, she came from, I think, a literature maybe background and mass media, and you know, then came into consulting and became our director. And she's incredibly smart, but she had that kind of unorthodox path. Yeah, you know, you look and see, oh well, she didn't kind of start here and then got here. So that happens a lot, you know.
Yeah, I think if you ask people, you know, I remember in you know, in my early to mid 30s, starting to ask my friends, like, okay, so you know, where'd you start? And you know, I don't know, you know, my husband, he got a degree. Oh yeah, way off. He got a degree in entomology and ended up in you know, in the New York City Bureau of Health. You know, other people, you know, who English majors who went into facilities management. And, you know, I found that, you know, outside of people who obviously put so much into their career at first, like, you know, medical and even to some extent legal, you know, they tend to have more trajectories that just don't change. It's way more common to see people move from where they started as an undergraduate into something else.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that are in that situation, and I've had that experience too. And it's very common now, I think. And it's one of those strange myths that I think gets attached to college, where people say, oh, well, you go to college for this one thing and you have to do that one thing. And I just don't think that that's true. People are very versatile, dynamic, you know, we can do all sorts of things. I don't, you know, saying me, I don't know that I know what you went to undergrad for.
I actually, you know, typical, like I wanted to be a doctor, right? So I did that. And I mean, I don't know if you could call it a pivot. It's like I changed my mind, right? So I majored in environmental science because, you know, a big thing with medical school nowadays is they want something that's not biology, right? They're like, do something different so you can bring something different to the table, which, you know, again, like our conversation is saying, a lot of people go from transfer fields and that actually helps them in their field. So I tried environmental science because I had like this sustainability class that I loved. But I said, you know, I love like these policies, but like I want to know more about like the science behind it. And so at one point I like went to my mom and dad and I was like, I actually want to be a scientist instead of a doctor. It was like very like scary for me, but I told them that and they're like, oh yeah, that's totally fine. And then again in my like, and you know, we still, it was not exactly like that, but basically they wanted me to be happy. And that's like the ultimate goal that a lot of people look for, is like a job that, you know, you don't hate, that hopefully brings you some joy. And at the end of my, you know, it was senior year. It was senior year. And I was thinking about my future as a scientist. I thought, but I love Taekwondo so much. You know? Like the idea of like sitting in a lab, not being able to kick bags or train, like, kind of hurt me inside. I was like, and my college experience, like when I first started, there was like 2 other girls in the Taekwondo club. By the end of college, there was more ladies than men. And so I mean, I'm not saying like I was the only reason, but representation mattered a lot. And so that's basically, you know, I was like, I can make more of a difference teaching martial arts and helping, you know, young girls. And also, you know, I have kids with ADHD that like find a lot of benefits in our program. And seeing my parents, obviously, we have this business set up. And so I was like, all right, let's do it. And again, I had to apologize to my parents because I wasted 4 years of college education because none of what I learned was relevant to martial art. But I mean, it kind of is too. You know, I still learned social interactions, and that's the important thing. You know, ultimately, it all boils down to people, right? And how Miss Helen like managed like the children in her like elementary school ended up applying to, I'm sure, to her business stuff, even though I guess apparently at some points it was patronizing. But like when I was teaching like my elementary, you know, we teach mostly kids. We have more adults now. But when I went to college and was teaching the Taekwondo club, it was a little weird because they're like, well, why are you treating us like kids? There's habits you just get. And sometimes it's helpful. You find what's helpful and what's not helpful and relevant. So yeah. But I didn't want to take over Miss Helen's time. We do this thing, Miss Helen, where we ask a really random question, and I think this is a good time because we've kind of gone off topic anyway. But my random question for you is, would you rather be a 2-inch elephant or a 200-foot squirrel? And you know, you can explain or not explain, whatever you would like.
You know, I think I'd rather be the 2-inch elephant, only because I like elephants better than squirrels. We've got squirrels that like try to raid our bird feeders, and they're just really rodents with tails. So I have to vote for the elephant because I think they're cooler animals than the squirrels are. Although it would be kind of cool to be one of those squirrels and just like, you know, then you'd get all the bird seed you'd ever want.
Yeah, that's like Godzilla squirrel.
Yeah.
I mean, 200 feet is really a lot. I also like elephants better than squirrels.
Like squirrels are more maneuverable, you know, like you can climb things. Elephants.
What are
like,
you gonna climb if you were 200 feet tall, though?
You just climb them out.
The Chrysler building? I don't know what's.
I live in like, you know, Amazon forests are huge. Like there's a lot of unexplored.
Yeah, you'd have to be in the Pacific Northwest, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, redwoods. Yeah. I don't know if redwoods have big acorns or not, but you know, that would be something. Scamper up one of those big trees.
Yeah, I guess the food supply would be a little short as a 200-foot squirrel.
This needs to be a really low budget sci-fi movie now, I think. That would be wild. Well, thank you, Helen, for coming on. We really appreciate your time speaking with us and engaging. And I really hope that when we start having the EP dinners again, maybe you can come to one and talk to us. And like I said, we have usually a couple students come. We try and keep it about 2-to-1 ratio for students to EPs so everyone can talk and mingle and that sort of thing. So I hope that you would come to one of those. We're able to host them once we get opened up again.
Yeah, I'd love to. And then, you know, I just want to, you know, my plug is more for the EPs, is that, you know, we love interacting with the students, and, you know, and we really are accessible through the internet, and, you know, most, if not all of us will respond, you know, within a day or so. And please, we're just a resource for you, and we'd love to be utilized. So
Yeah, we've had great experiences reaching out to the EPs. I think the program, the whole concept of it is incredible. And the fact how, that you are so accessible and you're so interested in helping is, I think for saying me and me both, it just warms our hearts because it's so encouraging. And when you're going through the MBA program, which is hard,
Yeah.
have just someone on your side is big. So yeah, I think we both appreciate it very much.
Well, good. Well, this was fun for me too.
Good, I'm glad. Sang-mi, any last remarks?
I don't believe so. I believe that's a wrap. So see y'all next time.